Hi everyone, it's Kim from Art Anthology. Thank you for joining us today. We are going to give it just a couple of minutes to give everyone a chance to find us and hop on. And then we're going to get started on our project, which is actually in two parts. We're going to do part one today, and then we'll finish it up the next time we get together in a couple weeks. But we are going to make a very, very simple mini album. And today we're going to actually be creating and decorating our signatures, which will be their pages in our little book. And then next time that we get together, we will create and decorate the cover and then bind our signature into the cover. Again, this will be the easiest mini album you ever make. And if you're a mini album maker, I think you'll appreciate how simple this is. But yet it's a cute little book. So we'll give it just a few more seconds and then we'll get started. If you're working along with me and you have the kit, just make sure you have 2 pieces of copy paper. Even if you don't have the kit and you don't plan on decorating, grab a piece of copy paper and a bone folder and you can at least learn how to make the signatures. And then you can choose to decorate them later if you want. So I think we're going to go ahead and get started so we can get both of our signatures made. But this is the little mini album that we're going to be making. And here's one that is totally decorated on the outside. And we'll take a look at this one in a little more depth here at the end. But here's one that I have bound. I have the signatures in the cover. So today we're going to be making our little pages, our signature. We're going to have 2 signatures in our book, which means we're going to have 8 pages. And then next week, or the next time we get together, I should say, we'll decorate the covers. And here's one that has the ribbon, and we'll talk more about the closure. But just to give you an idea of what another one looks like, different colors. So make it whatever color for whatever theme that you might be making a mini album for. But let's get started with our signatures. Now, I saw this idea on both Pinterest and Instagram a couple times. And what we're going to be doing now, they called this actually a mini album. So this is a finished signature, but they were considering this a mini album. But I thought, well, it's cute, but I think this would be much better for pages inside a mini album than just calling this a mini album. So that was where my inspiration came from to make this mini album. So just grab one of your sheets of copy paper, and you want to make sure it's copy paper and not heavier cardstock. And you're going to see why as we work through this, why thin paper is good for this. And grab your bone folder, and accuracy counts when we go through this. So we're going to start folding this up. We're going to take the short end and align it with the other short end. And I'm going to take my time because I want those corners and those 2 edges to match perfectly. And the more accurate you are with this, the better your signature, your final signature is going to come out. And I'm just going to kind of first finger press that because I want to make sure that's smooth and that I've got those edges together. And then I'll take my bone folder and press that down really good. And then I'm going to flip it the other way and fold it same place, but I want to make sure I have a really good crease. And then open that up, flip it the other way. Now let's take our long edge and line it up with the other long edge. Same process, line up those corners, line up that edge. And I really do take my time to make sure that's all lined up. Then just kind of finger press down. And then I'm going to take my bone folder. And then I'm going to flip it over. And on that same crease, just fold it the other way. Okay, so then we're going to open it up and we're going to take the short edge and we're going to line that up with the centerfold line. Now, I don't want to go over that centerfold line, but just right up to it, but not over. And I want to make sure that when I fold this down, my edges are going to be even with each other. So let me just finger press that down. And then I'll take my bone folder. Repeat the process where I flip it over and I'm going to fold that going the other way. I just want really, really nice creases. Okay, so now for me, I'm going to flip this around, take the other short edge, bring it into the center, and just repeat the process that we did on the other side. Fold that down, flip it over, and fold it. So we've got one signature done. So let's go ahead and fold our second piece of paper. So we'll have it ready to go. Depending on the time, it may or may not get decorated, but we'll have it ready to go. So take your second one, again, fold short end to short end and line those corners and that side up perfectly. And take your bone folder, make a good crease. Open it up and then fold it. It's going the other direction on that same crease. Okay, so now let's open that up and take our long edge and line it up with our long edge. Nice and neat again. And then just fold that down and use your bone folder to make a good crisp crease. And open that up and fold that same crease line just going the other way. So really this is easy. You could sit and have a couple books ready to go by just folding paper for a few minutes. But if you're nice and neat and accurate at this step, you will appreciate that when we get to the last step for our signature. So let's just fold the other side in. And then same thing, flip it over, fold it the other way, and then we are ready to decorate and paint our pages. Okay, so I've got both of these ready to go. You can use whatever dimensional paints that you want. If you purchase the kit that we use for our envelopes, or you're using your leftover paint from the envelopes, this is what I'm going to be using. So my pink is the pink taffy, and these are all dimensional paints from Art Anthology. So here's the normal size bottle. And then the purple color is called Wicked. And I think I told you the pink taffy. And then the third color is teal. So these are just our classroom size. And then the spray that we're going to be using here in a minute is Siesta Key. But we're going to start with the paints. And the technique we're using to put the paint on our paper is very, very similar to what we did with our envelopes, because again, this is thin paper. We don't need to load it up with a lot of paint, and we are just going to be creating layers. So get your brayer out, and I'm just going to be using 2 colors of paint on my piece of paper because again, I'm going to have a lot of other layers. So, let's see, what do I want to start with? I'm going to start with the teal. And I'm going to take my palette knife and I'm just going to spread a little bit out because again, I want this to be a thin layer. So I'm going to take my palette knife and just spread out that paint. And I don't need to coat my whole brayer. Again, I want this to be light. So I'm just going to pull a little bit of that paint off and pull it out so it's nice and thin. And then I'm going to tell myself, light hand, light hand. I don't need to press hard. I'm not trying to cover this whole piece of paper in one setting here. So let me just randomly put that around. Again, I have a lot of white space, which is good. I'm not trying to make this a solid teal color. Okay. So I'm going to add another paint to this, but I know I'm going to start with the teal on my second one. So while I have my teal paint out, so I'm not having to clean up and bring it out twice, I'm just going to grab my second piece of paper. And if you want to do, you know, 2 different colors totally on your 2 sheets, that's fine. I'm going to just do this while I have the teal out. Same process, roll some of that out, and then again, I try to tell myself use a light hand. At least we have a little more area on this to cover than we did on our envelopes. But just like the envelopes, we're going to be building up some color. Okay. So let me clean that up, and then I'm going to go back to my first one because that should be drying a little bit by now. And let me just clean up. I'm going to take a baby wipe here and just clean this up because I don't want my colors to really be blending on my craft mat. And I'll remember to clean my palette knife off, or otherwise I'll be putting this into one of my other paint colors. And I'm even going to just give my brayer, if it's dry, it doesn't really matter, but I'm just going to give that a little wipe while I'm cleaning everything else up here. So pick a second color, whatever you want to use. I'll pick the Wicked, the purple. Now, this is a very dark color, so again, I want to use a light hand. The Wicked can be wicked, so let me just take, I don't need a lot of this out because it is a pretty intense color. And I'm going to do the same process, and this is my first one. I'm just going to add this second color. And because it is dimensional paint, you're probably going to get kind of some interesting little patterns with it. And I'm going to keep this pretty light because it would be so easy to add more and just have nothing but purple or Wicked all over it. So I'm going to call that good. I've got 2 layers. Again, I'm going to be adding more. So let me just set this aside. And because I'm going to add the pink taffy to my third one, I'm definitely going to clean up my little craft mat here. So if you're playing along, go ahead and get your second color out. And I'm going to use pink taffy for this one. So you don't have to use the same 2 colors, even though your signatures are going into the same book. That's totally a personal preference what you want to do. And if you want to use 3 colors, you can, but because I know I'm going to be stenciling and inking on top, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to use 2 colors. And again, I want to keep this paper as dry as possible. I don't want to get it really, really wet, just so the paint dries quickly and so I don't ruffle my edges. And I'm going to show you what I'm talking about here in just a second with that. Okay. All right. So I've got my 2 paint colors on. So I'm just going to set the paints aside and give this one last. I just don't want to have my paint come up on something that I don't want it to be on. So let me just wipe that down real good. All right, so we are going to go on and use our Siesta Key spray or whatever color spray you're using. And I have some new stencils. Let me put this first one down since I think that's the drier of the two. So let's look through our stencils and see. I've got a bunch of new ones. You can see I've already given them a lot of love. What do we want to use? I think on this one, I'm going to use this one with the circles. And this is called Ringlets. And all the stencils are available at artanthology.net. So I'm going to use my spray, but I don't want to soak my paper because, again, it's thin. I don't need it real wet. And I'm just going to randomly move my stencil around. I'm not necessarily going to spray the entire stencil. I'm just going to set it down. We'll just set it on that side. And I am going to use some paper towels to mask because I don't want my spray going all across the rest of my page. And I'm even going to mask that, just the very edge. And I'm going to show you why here. And this is just kind of come after making a bunch of pages. So I don't want that real wet because if I get it too wet, it has a tendency to ripple my edges. So when I have my finished book here, you can see how this is kind of rippled. This page, you might be able to see that. So like when you get paper too wet and it dries and it kind of gets ripply, I don't really want that to happen. If I can prevent that, I'm going to. If this one obviously has several pages like that, and that's fine. It doesn't ruin anything. But if I can prevent that from happening, I'm going to. So that's why I'm just going to use paper towels, just covering up the very, very edge. And now I'm going to use, hopefully, a light spray. I don't need a ton of spray on this. I just want to get the pattern. So I'm not going to hold this down like 1 inch away. I'm going to hold this bottle back so I get hopefully a light spray. The first time I hit the pump, it always seems to be heavier than I want. And then I'm going to just take a paper towel and I'm going to go back through, try not to move my stencil, and just dab that up. And I'm going to stop since I moved that stencil, but I've got that pattern. And as you can see, I've got plenty of ink on there. So I'm just going to wipe this up a little bit. And I'm going to move my stencil. And I'm just going to do randomly across this whole thing. I'm not going to try to pre-think any of this. Let's just mask off our edges again all around and spray again. And depending on how open or how big your stencil is, you may have to do this just a couple times or maybe 3 or 4 times. Again, just depending on how big your stencil is. And this time I'll do a better job of holding that down and just dabbing that off. And then let me come over here and just do a little bit more. Again, this is just another layer. I don't need to have this whole thing with just one stencil really covering a lot of this page. I want it random because I'm going to add some inking to this, or you could add some stamping if you want to do that. So let me just give that another spritz. Sometimes it's hard not to keep, and I just keep wanting to move that stencil, spraying and spraying and spraying, but trust me, it doesn't take much. Okay, so we're going to set this aside to dry. You can see in some areas where I got it pretty wet, so I do need this to dry a minute. So let's set that aside. I'm going to pull my other one out, my other sheet out, and let's pick another stencil. I'm just going to wipe this up a little bit so I don't have spray on everything. And we're going to do the same thing, but let's just pick out a different stencil this time. Let's see. Let's do this floral one. And this one is called flower bursts. So I'm going to just do the exact same process, lay it down, mask it off. Along the sides. And then just give that a quick spritz. And again, I'm going to try to hold it back and just be light. And dab that stencil off. There, and that was pretty light, which is fine. Let's just come over here and do this. So if I'm like, oh, that's kind of light, I'm not going to go back and add more because I'm going to add another stencil to this. I just need a little bit of the pattern here and there. So actually, I like the fact that I didn't have that quite so wet, although on this one, I think this is going to be a little wetter because I got more spray on there. Okay. So I'm going to come down and do this little corner here. And again, I'm not, going to concern myself with how perfectly that stencil came out. I just need a hint that there's that design. My goal is just not to make it too wet. And then I think I'm going to just come down here and do this little corner down here. And I think I'll be good. Okay. And then we'll give this sheet an opportunity to dry. And we are done with our spray. So there we go. And again, when you're looking at this, it may not be very attractive to you right now, and that's okay because we're just going along and adding layers. And then when we fold this up into our pages, we're only going to see a portion of it. We're not going to see this whole page laid out like this. So I'm going to set this one aside. Let's go back to the other one. This is still kind of damp, but I think we're good to go ahead and start with our inks. So I'm going to be using Archival Ink just because it will not react. If something is damp or wet, it will not react with anything that I have on my page. And normally I would let this dry before I go on to the next step, but obviously we need to keep moving today. If you know that you're not going to put anything else wet, any kind of wet medium on top of our next step, you can use whatever ink you want. So if you want to use Distress ink, that's fine. But sometimes I'm like, oh, I might add something else at the end. So that's why I like to use Archival inks. So let's go back and look at our stencils again. And oh, I love this one. This one is called Beehive. So let's use our Beehive stencil. And I'm just going to look back through my inks here. If you're not sure what inks to use, get out that old color wheel. But I know that I like to use, I kind of use the same colors when I use these three paint colors. So I like to use like a yellow. That works good. That's a good contrasting color. I do use a patina color, even though my paint and my spray is kind of along the patina line. I could use like a darker blue color. And I like to use like a hot pink color. So let me just pull those three out and we may, try something else here, but let's start with this. And I'm going to actually start with my hot pink color through this stencil. And I'm going to do kind of the same thing that I did last time, except I don't need to mask it off this time. I'm just going to randomly stencil in. And this stencil, this beehive stencil is pretty, when you open it, when I pull it back, and normally I'll do the whole thing, since it's so open, it covers a lot of area. So I want to just kind of keep that in mind so I don't go crazy and have this whole thing colored. And then all I have is my beehive everywhere. So I'm going to try to kind of bear that in mind as I do this. But I do love this stencil. So I'm just going to randomly go around. And try not to do too much of it, even though I love it. Okay, there we go. Love it. So now I'm going to take the yellow next. And let's decide which other stencil here that we want to use. I've used that one already. Why don't we use this one with the swirls on it? And this one is called Luna. And again, I'm going to use my yellow ink and just go around and randomly add this. So I'm just building up all these different layers. And you can color in as many of these images or designs that you want, or as few. Totally up to you. And if you wanted to say, instead of maybe using so many stencils, you could stamp. You could use stamps and just do the same thing. But today I'm just going to stick with stencils. When I get to my final pages, and kind of once I figure out my theme for the different mini albums, that's probably when I would use a stamp. Like if I want to stamp a saying on it or a quote. So that's kind of why I decided I'll just stay with the stencils today. And again, I'm going to try to be as random about this. I'm not sure how random I'm doing here. So just go ahead if you're working with me and add some ink through that stencil all over your sheets. And when you finish one, we're going to go and work on the other one real quickly. And if you're just watching with your folded piece of paper, we're going to put that together in just a minute. So if you don't have some double-sided tape handy, I'd grab that, either an 1/8 or a 1/4 inch double-sided tape. I prefer tape rather than a wet glue. But it would be so easy to customize your colors if you're making a mini album for somebody. And pick your colors for whatever your theme is, or for whatever your friend's favorite colors are. Okay, I'm going to call that good. And again, it doesn't have to be like this one only has like one. That's okay, because once I get into the book, I can always add more. And again, when we fold these up, each little block here, each little rectangle is going to be its own page. So let's go, and I'm going to add a few things to my second one. I think I like this stencil. This one is called Art Nouveau. This one is very symmetrical. And as much as I wish I could just say, okay, I'm going to plop it here and plop it there, in my brain, because it's so symmetrical, I feel like I have to go up and down. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use the yellow again, but I won't do the entire design. I will pop around, but there's just something in my brain that wants me to make this be straight on the page for whatever reason. And this is a very open design again. So this would be a great one to spray, but just, you know, be aware you don't want to get it too wet. And I like to line this up for whatever reason on these lines. This stencil would be great if you wanted to use it for an entire page, just as a background. And all the stencils are available at artanthology.net. So check out what other stencils that you might be interested in if you like any of these, and check out the website. Okay, so let me just do a few more over here. I'm trying to be more random here. But I like to use the yellow, even though you think, oh, yellow doesn't really go. It kind of brings what's contrasting for one, and then it just sort of brings some light back into my colors, even though these are more pastel-y colors that I'm using on this. And I'll just put a little more over here. Okay. And I think we're done with that one. And let's just add one more. And, you know, let's go back to this Luna. That'll just be our common theme between the two pages. And I will actually, I'm going to use the patina color, even though we have the paint and the spray. I'm going to go ahead and still use this. And because I have ink on this, that pink, I think I might be pulling some of that off and mixing it in. We'll see, which is fine. Okay, and I'm just going to do a few of these. I'm not going to go overboard. And we'll just put a few here and there, because again, I'll be adding some other things to my finished pages once I decide what my theme is going to be. And these are pretty random, and on this pretty sporadic, because these are pretty dark. So I don't feel like I need a lot on here, because I do have all those other layers. Sometimes I get kind of carried away and I have way more than I would have ever originally anticipated having. So I'm going to finish this up, and then we're going to look at the next step on how to fold these. And you will need a pair of scissors, and again, some double-sided tape. And let me just do one over here, and then I think we're going to call it good. I got to do one down here. This is where sometimes I have a hard time stopping. Okay. That is good. All right, so I am going to let this one dry a minute, let that ink dry, and go back to my other one. And let's get ready to put these pages, fold these up into our pages now. So I'm going to get my double-sided tape out, and I'm using 1/4 inch and 1/8 of an inch would work just as well, and my scissors. And we're going to first just fold this in half, back on that fold line, make sure everything's nice and square again. And then we're going to be cutting from the center point along this fold line right on top of it. And we're going to stop at this intersection here where this other fold line comes across. So we're not having to cut very far, and I don't like to use a trimmer. It's just easier to use my scissors. I can see where I'm going. So from the center point here along the top of this fold line, and we're going to stop right where this other fold line intersects. So take your time and just cut right on top of that line, not to the side. It's thin paper, so it's very easy just to cut on top and stop right at that fold. So you can see where I've cut. And when I open it up, I just cut between those two center squares. So now let's flip this over, and I'm going to tell you where we're going to put our double-sided tape. And I like to use tape and not a liquid adhesive, because then I have a bigger mess and it's just easier to use the double-sided tape. If you have your sheet folded but not decorated yet, you might just want to mark where we're going to put the tape, because it's a lot easier to decorate our pages when it's one full flat sheet than trying to do it after it's all folded up. So grab a pencil, and this is where we're going to put our tape. We're going to do it on this first lower left-hand box at the bottom here along the edge. So here's my fold lines. And hopefully you can kind of see that box. And then the next box right to the right of that, along that bottom edge, we're going to skip the next box, the third box, and we're going to go clear over to that right-hand box, and we're going to put tape along that bottom edge. So it's important where we get our tape so our book goes together right. So the bottom left square or rectangle, the rectangle right next door, skip that third rectangle, and the far right is also going to have tape. Now go back to the rectangle in the center that you drew a line on, and right across that cut line on the other side, that rectangle at the bottom on the edge, the outer edge, we're going to put tape there too. So let me do this a little darker so that you can see that, because I know it's hard to see where it's folded. Those first two boxes, skip a box, and then the far right hand, and then go back to this center box, pop over the cut line, and then that opposing box along the edge, you're going to put a piece of tape. So when I do this, I'm going to put my tape, but I'm going to break at those fold lines. I'm not going to put just a solid piece of tape. I want to be able to pull these off individually. So I'm going to break at each fold line where I marked to put the tape. So I've got my 3 pieces on one side. I'm going to pop over to that other side and put the piece of tape. And it doesn't have to be right up against the edge of the fold line. You're going to see I'm not making that perfectly straight, and that's okay. We don't need it that way. And then I'm just going to burnish that down. And then I'm going to flip it back over. And I'm going to fold it up so that my short ends are on the top and bottom. This is just easier for me to handle it this way. And I'm going to take my fingers and I'm going to pull up on these two center squares where it comes up into that fold. And I'm going to split it. I'm going to pull those apart. You can see where my opening is. And I'm going to stand this up on the end. And I'm just going to pull those pieces that I have my hands on together, and then it's going to come up into like a cross figure or an X, however you're holding it. And the squares with the folded edges on top, I'm just going to fold those up. So this is how it should look. And then I'm just going to press that in, close up that gap, and then just lay it flat. Doesn't matter how, just however it wants to lay flat, that's what you want to do. And this is where you want to make sure that your edges are nice and even. And if you did a good job folding it at the very beginning, all your edges should line up really nice. And now this is where I'm going to pull this up and I can see my tape. So if I pull up the first layer, I can see my tape. And if I go to the last layer, I see my tape. Now, if you're not seeing your tape, it's probably because it's when you folded it, it's laying on the opposite side, and that's okay. So if you pull it up and there isn't tape on that bottom layer, pull it back, and I bet your tape should be on this top layer. So if that's the case, then turn it around so that it's easy to see that tape laying flat down. I just find it easier to handle it rather than having my tape up on this top layer. So once you get that done, then we're going to pull up, and I'm going to start at the bottom. It doesn't really matter, but it's easier for me to start at the very bottom layer. And I'm going to pull that liner up from the tape and just fold those other pieces down on top. And again, if you did a good job folding it, all your edges should line up nice and neat. Then pull up that first layer and pull up that tape and lay that down and just burnish that. So when you pick it up, again, you're going to have this little like hole in the center, but don't panic, because when we bind this into our book, we're not going to have to worry about that. That's going to actually form a couple pockets. So what I like to do is then lay it flat, and I will go through and find how it lays the best. So I just kind of keep turning the pages, and you're going to find one that you're going to feel like, okay, it really lays nice and smooth with this page. So I don't really worry what's on it. I just kind of try to find that smoothest page. Like this one doesn't lay smooth, and I'm not going to force it because it just kind of naturally has one that it likes. So I'm going to say this is my page, and I'm just going to take my bone folder and go around those edges. And so now I've got one signature done and 4 pages. And when we bind this into our cover, we're going to have 2 side pockets and 2 top loading pockets. So let's go ahead and do the other one. So we have both of them done. Pull out your other sheet. And again, if it was real wet, I would wait and let it dry. But I think we're good to go. This is pretty dry. So again, fold this in half. And we're going to cut again from the center point along top this fold and stop that intersection with the other fold line. So let's go ahead and do that. And then we'll open that up, and we've got our cut in the center across those two center boxes. So let's flip it over, and again, let's mark where we're going to do our tape. We're going to start in the lower left box. So we'll put a piece of tape there. We're going to put a piece of tape along the bottom edge of the next box. We're going to skip a box, and then on the far right hand side, we're going to put a piece of tape. Then we're going to go back to our center box, go across to our cut line, and then on that opposing box on the outer edge, we'll put a piece of tape. So let's go ahead and put our tape down. Remember to break at each fold line. And don't forget the one on the other side there in the center. And then I do like to burnish those down just because I think the liner comes off so much easier. Okay, so once we get our tape down, we're going to flip it back over. And we're going to grab those two center boxes, and those folds will come up easily. And we're just going to pull those apart and pull up at the same time, so it stands up on the other end. And then I'm just going to take my fingers, and where those folds are at the top, I'm just going to kind of press those down. So again, I've got that kind of open square shape or diamond shape, depending on how you're holding it. Just push those together so those close up. And then just lay it flat. Press that down. And again, your edges should line up good if you folded it accurately at the beginning. And now I'm going to peek. So this time when I laid it down, my tape is on that top layer as opposed to that bottom layer. So I'm just going to flip this over, and now my tape will be at the bottom layer on all those edges. And that's just easier for me to see and pull those liners off. So I'm going to lay it down, and I'm going to start at the bottom, and I'm going to pull those liners off, and just press all that down, and then pull up my top layer and pull the rest of those liners off. And again, I like to just always burnish it down with my bone folder, because then I know it's not going to come unstuck. So then this is where, again, I take it. I'm just going to fold it in half, and I'm going to go through and find which one I think where it lays the flattest. And the book will find that for you. If you are more concerned about which layer you want on top, that's fine. But like this one, it's not happy with that. It's like not natural. I actually think, let me try this one. Usually it's like a side opening one where it lays the best for me. And I think it likes this one the best. So I'm just going to take, and this one's a little more crumply than my first one. But I'm just going to go through and use my bone folder to make those creases on the side nice and crisp. And now I'm ready to go. So I've got my two signatures ready to go, and two side openings, and we'll put these on the top, and they'll be our two top openings. So we've got our 4 pages. So not identical, but coordinated. And now you can see where you don't see that whole sheet. You just see a portion of all those images on each page. So let me tell you what we need to have ready for next week, because next week we're going to put our book together. And then if we want to decorate our pages some more, stamp on them, put quotes on them, we can do that. So I'm going to pull this one back. And so this is where we're headed for next week. So we need our cover. And for that, we need some lightweight chipboard. And I'm going to show you what I have here, because I throw so much chipboard away. I usually just get into the recycle bin and see what I have. And cracker boxes, cereal boxes. This is a cereal box. Lightweight chipboard can be found on a lot of packaging that we're just throwing away. If you don't have any, then just whatever chipboard that you have in your stash works. But again, for this, I'm just going to use something from a cereal box. The size of this chipboard, so you have it cut and ready to go, is 6 3/4 by 4.5. So again, 6 3/4 by 4.5 is the size of my chipboard. And then I have scored it 3 inches in on each side. And we'll go through this again next week. But if you want to have it ready to go, those are the measurements. And then 3 inches in. So I got this on my scoreboard. 3 inches in on each side. Scored it, flipped it around, put it on my scoreboard. 3 inches in and scored it. Because I want to go ahead and be able to bend this, make that crease. Now, this is going to be the inside of my cover, but I still really don't want this showing, and I really don't just want a chipboard cover. I wanted to have a white cover so I could decorate it. So I went ahead and I put 2 coats of white gesso. If you have white acrylic paint, that works just as well. Again, I'm not covering the whole inside. You can still see the logo and the picture and everything else, but this is on the inside of the book. So my outside has 2 coats of white gesso. Again, white acrylic paint. I just don't want it the chipboard color when I go to decorate it. So I've made a couple, and these are all different weights. This is a cracker box, and I actually kind of like this weight better. So just play around. This one I did, but this is from a Kleenex box, but it's really lightweight and flexible. It would still work because we're going to be adding some more paper onto this, but just feel and see what weights you have and what is easy for you to work with. Then I went through and I just pulled out some of my cardstock that I had decorated for backgrounds, and I just have a box of stuff that I've just colored, never used, and I just found something to coordinate. So those were already decorated, and then I'm just going to cut those to fit. So look through your background stash and see if you have something to coordinate, or go ahead and use your paint colors and just color some cardstock, anywhere from 65 to 110 pound. Again, nothing special. You will need some twine or some cording. Again, nothing special. I think this is just some cording I got in the jewelry department somewhere. But something with a little heft to it. Thread would be too thin because we do need this to hold our pages in. And then if you want to have inserts, I cut some for inside my pockets, and I have not decorated these yet, but these are 2.5 by 3 3/4. And I believe those are all the same for both the top loading and the bottom loading pockets. Yeah. So if you want one for each pocket, you'll need 8 of these. And again, if you want to have them cut 2.5 by 3 3/4. So if you want to go ahead and just cut those, you can decorate them. You can do whatever you want. Mine are just white because I'm not exactly sure what the theme of my book's going to be yet. But that's what we will need for next week. You will also need some kind of a little like hand punch. I just used a hand punch on this, but I think this was like 1/8 of an inch, real thin, or a pokey tool like a piercer, something that you could poke through the cardboard. Whatever you have on hand. You don't have to have any special tools. These are easy to make. And then if you know what your theme is, if you have some other die cuts that you want, or if you have some decorations, if you have some ribbon. So I colored this ribbon with it's just white seam tape that I colored with the coloration spray. We're going to attach a ribbon, and I'll give you some ideas on how to do that. And here's another one where I decorated the outside. So again, if you have some decorations that you want to put on the outside, the shell was colored with the coloration sprays and the Posca pens. And this one just has one. This is a smaller book. This just has one signature in it, but folded the same way that we just did today. But you can see what it looks like with just different colors, but very simple to make. So the basic thing to have next time that you will for sure want to have is your chipboard cover cut, scored, and either gessoed or white acrylic paint on it. And one last time, the measurements for the cover is 6 3/4 by 4 1/2, scored 3 inches in on each side. And then I go ahead and fold that, so when I paint it, I make sure I have paint where it's going to fold in, because it kind of cracks, and I want to make sure there was paint in that. And then again, you're going to want your paint. So pull out the paint that you used today. And again, your ink pads. And I did not use any spray on this because it would take too long to dry. So I just used paint and my ink pads. So just pull out your stencils, paint, ink pads, have your cover ready to go. And we will go ahead and put our book together next week. So thank you for joining me today. I hope you had fun. If you did not decorate your sheet of paper, you still have plenty of time to do that. Fold it up and then do 2 of them. And then you can join us next week in putting together and making a finished book. So thank you for joining me today. And I'll see you in a couple weeks when we complete our mini albums.